Alright guys, welcome back. Now it's been just over a month since the Supercapitals have been released, and right now the most popular supercarriers are the Wyvern and the Nyx. The Wyvern is popular because it has an amazing shield tank, the best shield tank in the game. The Nyx is popular because it has insane DPS. Although the two first ones that have been built were a Eon and a Hell. Or to be more accurate, the first two to be built on the server are both Hell supercarriers. Now, today I'll be using the Nyx to run one of the new capital test sites. I think it is the Blood Raider one. Last one I was doing the Gurista Pirate with the Wyvern and Hell. Today I'll be doing the Blood Raider one, although this time I will be solo. Only the Nyx will be present inside of the site. Now the defense disruption burst on this ship is absolutely terrifying. It does cripple the shield and armor of your target. In the medium slots I have the classic setup, although I have one target painted this time around. I figured out to do something different instead of the classic web that I use, so I just slapped one target painter. As for the fighters, I have a very nice combo here, and this time, since I'll be solo in the site, I want to have some light fighters as well. Basically, the heavy fighters are being used against capitals, while the light fighters are being used against subcapitals, and they're also being used against fighters that the enemy carriers can spawn. In this case, I have the assault light fighters, and so far they have some good stats. They're not the fastest, but they should still get the job done. After all, I do have some very nice modules and a very nice implant on this. Well, I would say on this little boat, but this is anything but a little boat. It's a huge ship, so yeah. On this, I have some decent modules on this monster. So, for the low slot modules, I have some repairs, a capacitor battery, the new damage control, navy fighter, micro object guide, the damage mod, and dual adaptive harness. Now, recently, with the last update, we have received a Nano core for this ship, although I'm fairly sure it's probably not going to be a Nano core for everyone, but you know, you can always use a different appearance for your Nano core. It doesn't have to be the default one, which is very nice. You can customize the Nano core however you like, and it does give some very good stats. So I will give them this. The Nano core does have some good stats, but we only have one option, and we will see what other cores will be released in the future. Now, as for the rigs, I have two 4P combat integration modules, and I have two of the rig slots empty. That is because I wasn't really sure if I should add more tank or add more DPS, since this is going to be more of a PvE build. I maybe, you know, I was thinking about perhaps adding a bit more DPS to this ship is going to be a good thing, but at the same time, I also figured out that I'll be alone, no other carrier with me, so can't really go with a full-on paper build inside of the capital test site. After all, these test sites are no joke, and if you jump in unprepared, your ship will be destroyed very easily. Now I know the module layout is a mess. I really wish that they would make the icons just a little bit smaller, or to add a third row, because this honestly is a mess of the module list. But I gotta get used to it. After all, the Titans will have equal as many modules as this thing. Now the tank is not that bad. I mean, it is, I would say, okay in the Supercapital standards. It has like 5.6 million in armor, and this is with two missing rigs. So at this moment I thought to myself, well, let's just add two more defense rigs, and that is because last time when I was flying the Hell, the tank didn't hold on that ship. The tank actually didn't hold. Was really risky, and the hell, I don't know how it survived, but it survived on very low shield. Somehow it started boosting, but it would definitely not survive the second room. The second room was very nasty. Although since I am going to be solo this time, I don't think that I'll get to the second room, because the rift is actually timed. You don't have like unlimited time inside, so it is not really something that's made to be doable solo. Although you can go solo, but you might watch the rift close, because there's just so many ships, and if you go full glass inside, it is going to be, you know, very risky, because they do a lot of damage, and you are going to be fighting other Supercapitals inside. So tank is definitely very important. At best, if you are attempting to run one solo, and if you're going with a glass build, at least make sure that you have an alt that has a force auxiliary, or well, that can't be called exactly solo, but yeah, you will definitely need a logistic ship at your side if you plan to go with a glass build in these capital test sites. It is basically built for a whole corp to participate in, for a whole alliance. Basically fun for everyone, fun for the whole family, as they like to say. Although don't take that out of context, please. Don't take that out of context. It can sound, oh my god, yeah. I know, that kinda sounded bad, I know, my apologies. In any case, joke aside, so let's take a look at, oh, I'm actually scanning the site, alright, fair enough. So, the site has 3 signals, which is very small, and it does take, in some cases, multiple tries to get to the signal, but yeah, the site has been found, and now I will replace the scanner, and we'll add the target painter, and then I can warp to the site. You can technically use any other module, really. I just decided to use a target painter just to increase the signature radius of the targets, even if just by a little bit, it does help.
Undocking.
As for the fighters, I have the heavy fighters as my primary ones, but I would say the air superiority fighters, the really fast ones with the smallest DPS, can be very important, especially to get the tackle off you. But that's more for PvP, although it can also be utilized in the capital test sites. So technically you can use one Supercarrier with heavy fighters to focus on the big ships, on the capitals, and technically you can also have one Supercarrier that's going to be built to focus down the sub-capitals and the fighters, because in the capital test sites you will find a lot of fighters, and even if you keep shooting down the fighters, the carriers will keep spawning even more. Now, someone actually asked me a very interesting question, I think it was like last week. If the fighters are spawning in, well, basically with no limit, can you technically farm the fighters, and is it technically a infinite ESC farm? And honestly, I have to say that's a good question, and that's a very interesting idea. Now, I would say, and I would actually agree, that it could have been a infinite ESC farm if the sites were permanent. Basically, if the capital test sites had like, I don't know, like a 5-day despawn time, or you know, if the site would be up for a week or a month, then you can just enter inside occasionally and just farm the fighters and get out. You don't have to bother with shooting anything else. Basically spend a couple hours shooting fighters, and you might farm like, I don't know, 5-10 billion ESC per day or something like that. And I can kind of see that being a little bit ridiculous. But yeah, if the capital sites were lasting a little bit longer, then yeah, could have been a infinite ESC one. But since the rift space, the capital test site, isn't permanent, it does collapse after some time. Even if you don't clear it, it does collapse and it can kick you out of the site. Now something weird happened last time. Last time with the Wyvern, I entered solo and I got kicked out. Since I wasn't really happy with the result and I did use a weird build, I did decide to spawn a second one and to attempt to do the second one with the hell as support. For some reason, that site did live a lot longer than the first time I did this. I don't know why. Perhaps it's a bug. Perhaps there is something that's just, you know. Perhaps there is something that I don't know about the mechanics of how this works. But the second time I entered, it lasted a lot longer. So maybe you can get that infinite East farm going on. I don't know. Perhaps I should actually do a bit more tests on that. But I'm interested to hear what you guys think about the infinite East farm thing. Can be kind of a, I would say, funny concept, really. But since the site does collapse, it's not really a infinite East farm. Would be hilarious if it were. Although I'm not saying that there might, you know, I'm not saying that something like that will not show up at one point. There could be a moment where a bug or something like that occurs that can allow it to be a infinite East farm. So I would say keep an eye out for that, because, you know, bugs in the code happen and perhaps it might actually happen one day, who knows. Now, this is the Blood Raider test site is a site that usually has lasers as their primary weapon, so shield tanking here might be tough because lasers do primarily EM and thermal, and shields have the lowest resistance on EM and thermal. So shield tanking can be rough. And this is a site where armor tanks will prevail, and the Nyx is an armor tank, so it should have no problems in tanking lasers on armor. It just goes along those lines because that's just how lasers work on armor. You will notice that when you are shooting a target on shield, you will notice that you're doing an enormous amount of damage, but when you hit armor, that DPS does drop off significantly. So that will help a lot with tanking this side. And I would actually say this might be easier to tank than to tank the Grista one, because in the Blood Raider capital test site, I would actually recommend that you fit yellow harness, the yellow harder combined with adaptive armor harness. The yellow harder does literally reduce the incoming damage by up to 50-60%. Now, it's not going to give you like 50-60% resistance, but it does reduce that much damage. When you apply all the math and all the numbers, it does reduce the incoming damage by a big margin. That is going to make tanking this site much easier. Now, throughout this video, I might show you how difficult it is to change the fighters in combat. Now, I like drones. I was primarily a drone boy pilot when I started the game with the RB, and swapping drones is still one of the most annoying things to do in the game. Now, you might be wondering why. Well, it is sluggish and it takes so long to load the fighters in the fighter tubes. It's not even funny. And I would say that's the main issue that's preventing me and that's preventing many other players to fly these ships. Because fighters are basically your primary source of DPS, and if you lose fighters, you have to replace them. Now, besides them costing a lot on the wallet, because these things do cost a lot on the market right now, It also costs a lot of valuable time to swap them in combat. If your squad gets destroyed, then you have to replace them, and well, then you have to go to the fitting window and you have to click on the fighter tube and then basically load the fighters from the fighter bay to the slot, or you can hot swap them on the screen here. But yeah, you will notice that it's not as easy as it sounds when you see that there is a mess in the fighter bay, especially if you have all the fighters separated by 1 or 2 units per fighter. That is honestly one of the most annoying things about the drone fighter related weapon systems. But I will say this, and I'll give some credit to the developers. They did actually improve it a little bit. It used to be a lot worse in the past. It's gotten better. It's gotten better, but it is still really annoying to change the drones and fighters mid-combat. And there is still lots of room for improvement. And I think they know, and they'll keep on fixing that. Now recently, someone told me, one of my friends told me how fighters were bugged. Now I personally haven't noticed any bug on the fighters and drones at the moment, but a while ago I did have bugs with my drones, and sometimes when I click focus fire in PvP, one of my drones doesn't listen. So does that kinda count as a bug? Maybe. Could be just the server tick, but it can also be a bug, so I'll just keep that open for now until I do more investigation or more testing, to be more accurate. Now, I would like to talk about the Supercarrier cover module. The Supercarrier cover module is the most important module that you should have on your Supercapital. That module replaces 3 capacitor batteries. It gives you armor repair, it gives you shield repair, I believe it also gives you some hull repair. So it does add a lot of benefits to your ship. Now the most notable benefit is definitely the fact that with the carrier cover module you don't have to carry multiple capacitor batteries with your ship. Last time with the Wyvern, I was able to actively sustain the active tank with dual capital shield boosters with only 1 capacitor battery, and everything else was just full tank, adaptives and adaptive harness and stuff like that. And the capacitor never dropped below 70%. Now the drawback is that the carrier cover module does eat a lot of fuel, and you will notice that a lot of new modules do eat a lot of fuel on those supercarriers. So your ship will be able to sustain its capacitor for as long as you have fuel in the fuel bay. Now the most, I would say, energy packed fuel source are plasmids, and that's basically the main fuel source in the game right now, although I'm fairly sure a lot of you guys also use some other materials, some other stuff, but I primarily use plasmoids. And I would suggest that before you go into combat that you stock up on the plasmoids. Fill up the fuel bay, fill up the cargo hold, but the cargo hold isn't really necessary to be filled up, although you can. I guess as a backup source of fuel, it's always nice. And you can also refuel, then basically fill up the fuel bay again. That way you will have fuel for a very long time. That is because if you plan to keep on using the high slot modules, the new modules, then your fuel will definitely go down very quickly. That's why always go out with a full fuel bay, and of course with the ship fully refueled. The one thing that prevented me last time from doing more rooms was the fact that I ran out of fuel on both of my supercarriers, so I had to fall back. but in a fleet that shouldn't be a big problem. And in the capital test site you can't drop boxes, so if your corp mate loses fuel, you can help them, and that's something that I don't really like. You should be able to drop boxes, but right now you can't drop boxes because it will not let you to do that. But yeah, the carrier car module does replace capacitor batteries, which I would say is the most important thing on the ships. You might wonder, well, why? Well, I mean, you replace capacitor batteries with even more tank. That way, your ship can withstand even more damage, which I would say is very important, especially for something that's like 9 kilometers long. I would say tank would be very important. Even when you build them to be glass, they are still ridiculous tanky. The Wyvern is living proof of that. Now I was able to get the tank capacitor stable with only one capacitor battery, and I find that pretty fascinating, because that's usually not something that's possible on the other capitals. You can do that on the Dreadnoughts. The Dreadnoughts have 3 main builds. You have the trunk Dreadnought, you have the capacitor battery Dreadnought, and you have the glass Dreadnought. Now I usually fly the trunk Dreadnought because of my unique situation, where I really have to have the best possible armor resistance in order to be able to survive, because if you go with a full-on capacitor battery Dreadnought build, you might be capacitor stable and you might be able to maintain the armor repairs for a very long time, but if your ship is met with an enormous amount of damage, let's say 20 glass Dreadnoughts drop on your revelation, if you have capacitor batteries, you will have good capacitor, but the sheer alpha damage, the sheer DPS coming from these ships would just shred through the armor of your Dreadnought, and you are not going to be able to repair that. However, if you are with full-on resistance and you still have a decent capacitor that should last you long enough to get to safety, in that case having more resistance is the way to go. So you really do have a lot of different builds, and the glass, well, the glass Dreadnought is used for a anti-capital fleet. It's also being used for PvE, so each one of these builds has their own place in the game and their own purpose. But in my case, the Chonk Dreadnought is definitely the way to go. Although recently I haven't been flying the Revelation that often. I kinda want to fly the RB a bit more, the cover-top cruisers. I really do miss the good old days. I don't know. Yeah, a couple days ago I found out that my old corp is still playing, and the players that I used to play with back then, they are still in the game. And I kinda woke up all the memories that I used to have with the RB, because back then when I was flying with them, I was using the RB, and that ship has a very special place for me in the game, so I kinda want to fly the RB a little bit more. I really do miss that ship, and back then the game was a lot different, honestly. It's still fun, but I don't know, the RB made things, I would say, very interesting back then. And the RB is still active, even more dangerous. Upgrade to the RB3. I will have to show you my original RB at one point. I always forget to do that. I kept telling myself that I will take the original RB out of Null, but I actually never had the time to do it. I'll have to do a special video on the old school RB at one point. I really do miss that ship. I haven't seen it in a very long time, but it's still alive. It is still alive. That ship is a legend, just how the Macariel is also a legend. Truly iconic ships that I fly. But now back on the Nyx. The armor tank is holding really well. Now with Blood Raiders, you have to be careful with your capacitor. Now, since this is classified as a nihil space, technically a nihil space, it will have a capacitor debuff effect. It does significantly reduce the capacitor recharge on all ships. Now, recently the Supercapitals were actually buffed. They have received a 75% resistance to electronic warfare like Nosferatus and Neutralizers, which basically means that they are not going to be as effective on these ships as they would be effective on some other ships. Now, despite that, you should still be careful about the capacitor outlet that you have. However, I would say that the resistance on electronic warfare is definitely helping out a lot.
We're being warp scrambled.
You can feel that the capacitor on this monster is holding really well. And of course, I have to say, the armor repairs use a lot less capacitor than the ship boosters, so it is much easier to get one of these ships capacitor stable than a shield tank ship. Also a very significant advantage for armor tanks. However, the Nyx is slightly different from the Wyvern or from the Eon, since the Eon is the chunk Supercapital. Mainly in the stats of the ship. The Eon has a bonus on armor resistance, while the Nyx doesn't have that, so you will not have the same armor resistance as on the Eon. But it should not be a big problem, since, you know, it is still ridiculously tanky. Now, if I had the DPS build, it would definitely be a bit more difficult to tank. It would still take a long time for the armor on this thing to fall down, but I feel like I would have trouble with the DPS builds on one of these sites, at least if I am solo, since this time I don't have any other ship to support me. Last time I had the Hell. The Hell Wyvern combo did work really well. Now, what other Supercapital can be used with the Nyx? Now, I would say the Eon will work really well, because both are armor tanks. The Eon can serve as the bullet sponge, while the Nyx can be used as the DPS machine, especially because of that defense special module that cripples the stats of the opponent. I mean, it is incredible how nasty this thing can be. The Nyx has the highest DPS out of all Supercarriers. With the right build, with the offense K fighters, you could technically hit 1,000,000 DPS with the DPS shred, and that is quite scary. 1,000,000 DPS per Nyx. That gives out some ideas, doesn't it? But of course, that is full DPS, full glass, and such a ship would be a easy target. No, I say easy target for a fleet, because it would not have any tank. And I would say that there is a good chance that the first Supercapital might be built for full DPS. Now, I've heard some of my friends that are participating in basically they're hunting capital ships. They told me to look out for the first Supercapital kill very soon. Apparently they managed to find one, and that Supercapital is currently being used for PvE with a glass build. So I'm not going to say anything basically. That's all I'll say. I know that that it is planned to drop capitals on a ratting Supercarrier. I don't know when, I don't know where, but I'll probably hear a couple minutes in advance before the sign is opened. And yes, it is going to be probably a blue tackle, just as the simulations, as the meme says. Oh man, it's gonna be funny. I said that a blue tackle will get a Supercapital, and then I hear that they're actually doing it. It's gonna be hilarious. I'm not going to say what Supercapital will be, because you know it might shrink the aim, right? But I'm not going to say what Supercapital will be hot dropped. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward for the kill. Would be funny if the Supercapital palette. That's actually, never mind. Let's just, you know, it will be a surprise. It will be a surprise. I think that's the best thing to say. Now, here is me changing fighters, and as you can see, one fighter, 3, 4, takes a year to load. Can you imagine how long it took to load 12? Yeah, it took a while to load 12 light fighters in the fighter tubes on this thing. And it still has some pretty good DPS. I mean, 52,000 DPS, that's quite scary. With the DPS shred that can go about 250,000 DPS. With the Dromos, about 350,000, 400,000 DPS. Yeah, that's pretty good. Pretty good DPS. And some pretty good ISK rewards as well. Although it would be much better if I had a fleet here, but since I don't, it is still pretty good. I still remember the first Supercapital video that I made on the Wyvern, when I was testing out the Wyvern against the Revelation. An actual fleet assembled and went to the system where I was recording at, and they expected to see a Wyvern ratting. There were like 80 players, 80 to 120 players lined up in the system. It was hilarious. It was very funny. It was very, very funny. And I was like 2 jumps away. I was actually, I mean, my actual position was 2 jumps away with the Revelation. I actually did expect them to come to the Revelation, but they didn't. It was very funny. It was truly a classic EVE experience, especially since I premiere most videos, and they might appear to be live, although they're not. They're pre-recorded, but I am live in the chat, so you can basically chat with me in real time while the video has been pre-recorded. Not really sure if I made any sense there, but I hope that you understand what I was trying to say here. 94 things are shooting at me, and the tank on the Nyx is holding really well. Again, it's very easy to tank lasers on armor. That's why the Apocalypse Striker fleet failed to dent my armor on the Revelation back then, because lasers are very easy to tank on armor, especially if your ship is a armor tank with some good stats. Much easier to, I would say it's much easier to tank with the Eon, with the extra armor stats, but that's to be expected. After all, the Eon is the tanky Supercarrier, while the Nyx is the more DPS focused one. Again, I like the fact that all these supercarriers have their unique role within the game. All of them will fulfill a specific purpose, and there is a ship for everyone basically. Although right now they're a bit expensive, and that's why they are rare. But as more and more are being built, some are being built in total secrecy, and I believe, yeah, some of them are built in total secrecy, but someone will always leak stuff. That's why if you're planning to build these ships, do it completely covered ups. Only the closest of the closest friends that you have should participate in building them, especially if if your location is a bit in a, let's say in a quite active region, then you want to make sure that you don't get spotted with one of these ships. Although, I mean, they're huge ships, eventually they will be spotted, so I would say some deep null pocket far away from everything basically. That's where I would use one of these ships for PvE. Somewhere where you can place a scout, some, let's say, 10 jumps, 20 jumps ahead through a pipe where you can watch traffic when there is only one way in and one way out. That's, I would say, the safest way where you can fly these ships. And if you see even one suspicious neutral, I would dock around the time where they get close to you, because you never know what their intentions are. Nullsec is very interesting and honestly quite fun. Although I don't know, flying these things might be a bit too stressful. Actually, I have no idea, but so far I have been enjoying them. Still haven't bought one of my own Supercapital, but perhaps I will at one point. We will see. Haven't decided on what to do, since Titans are also literally around the corner, and maybe if I get lucky, might be getting a Titan or something. I don't know. Not really interested in Titans, but I might have a use for them. I might have a purpose for Titans. I might have a purpose for them, so we will see. I know some of my friends that will get Titans, but in my case, I don't know. If I get a chance to fly one, I will, but we will see. I'll definitely keep you updated on that. So, I believe the rift will collapse very soon. Yeah, I think that the rift is about to collapse. Okay, and this is basically what happens if the rift collapses while you are still inside. Now, some players thought that you lose your ship if you enter the rift and it collapses, which, you know, would be quite interesting, but it's not really what happened. Although I believe at one point it used to kill your ship if you fail to leave, so there was always that, you know, element of fear or surprise, or there was always something that kept you on your toes. But right now it doesn't kill your ship. Would be funny if it did. And well, Nihilo Space collapsed, and it will basically send your ship from the original warping location, which in my case was the station. Well, the Nyx definitely does pass the test.
Docking request accepted.
Honestly, this ship is really fun to fly, and if you like DPS and if you like armor tank, then I would say the Nyx might be the ship for you. But again, you have 4 of these ships, and in the end decide the ship that will work the best for you. But right now, I honestly enjoyed flying the Nyx. It's a fantastic boat. And well, hope that I could help you to. Well, my idea was to show you how the test site works, and I wanted to do a little stress test of the Nix, and I'll do the same thing with the other two remaining super capitals. So if you want to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. It does help out a lot. And with that being said, stay safe, fly safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.